You are. You're good. You're good now. Shouldn't be. I don't think so. Probably shouldn't whistle. You good? What she said. Adam, let's make sure we don't talk too much about Carlos Hyde. I don't want his ownership to go up. I've been drinking lean all day, man. I've been doing enough being Little Wayne. I also think I just called him Little Wayne. And we are live. Welcome to Live Before Lock, the show that goes live before Lock. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Adam Scherer. We are here to break down Seahawks Eagles, which should be a football game. Maybe at some point in time, we'll be able to break down Ravens and Steelers. Who the hell knows when that game is actually going to happen? Apparently, that's tomorrow afternoon. We'll see. But anyway, Adam, what's up? Wednesday tomorrow, Wednesday? I don't know the days anymore. Thanksgiving's messed me up.
Yeah, Wednesday afternoon.
Cool. I don't have to record those videos tomorrow then.
Yeah, and I actually just saw the reason it's during the afternoon is because there were already plans in place to broadcast the Rockefeller Christmas special Wednesday night. So couldn't play Wednesday night.
Yeah, can't miss that, you know. Anyway, this is going to be a fun one. There's a couple weird quirks to this little Eagles Seahawks slate, so we'll dive into that in a bit. As you get in the door, please hit hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. That all helps us out a ton. We've got a lot to talk about. We've got some free content. We've got some Cyber Monday promos that are not going to be active right now because we don't want to shut down Awesemo.com prior to lock, but they will activate again post lock. And we've got a giveaway going on as well. So plenty to talk about, but I think we need to start first and foremost at the captain spot. But I would be remiss if I did not mention our sponsor for this show, No House Advantage. We're going to touch on some props the No House Advantage has for some of these guys. Now, if you haven't heard anything about No House Advantage, you're not just making a DFS lineup, you're picking props. So if we have a prop, say Russell Wilson, 2.5 passing TDs, first and foremost, you would select over or under, and then you would assign a confidence ranking. So 7 points, 6 points, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The goal being to win all of your props and accumulate the most points. I recommend you play on No House Advantage today because they have a $1,500 to first, $3K guaranteed contest going tonight, $15 to get in. That is only 43% full. You cannot beat overlay. It is the thing that you should be looking for every single day that you're playing DFS, because the less you spend on rake, the better off you're going to be in the long run. We'll touch a little bit more on No House Advantage as we go and that prop that I actually mentioned. So let's just start at the top. Captain spot. We've got a couple guys picking up some ownership. Very clearly, Russell Wilson is the heavy chalk. We got him projected for about 28% ownership right now. Tyler Lockett coming in second. Do those two guys seem like the two best captain options to you?
Yeah, I think so, given the pricing. Wilson, pretty much self-explanatory. He's the best quarterback in this game, one of the best in the league. But particularly, in this game where you have some uncertainty about who's going to even be playing quarterback on the other team. So I think Wilson obviously stands out. And then Lockett, it's kind of a coin flip between him and Metcalf every game. It seems like which one of them is going to have the monster game. But on DraftKings, you're getting a nearly $2,000 discount on Lockett. So I think it makes sense that he'd be the higher owned captain because he lets you get a little bit more into the rest of your lineup.
Yeah, Lockett's price tag really standing out to me. Do you have anybody else at captain that you have your eye on? And then we'll transition to some of the MVP options on FanDuel. I
think Miles Sanders is really interesting. For one, he's just good. I mean, he's a talented running back that can, produce big plays and give you kind of a slate-breaking score. But also with the uncertainty between or around, I guess, what the Eagles are going to do with Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts, who was taking more reps with the first team. I think it's not the most likely outcome, but there are ways that this game can go where I think it turns into a little bit more of like a run heavy Eagles offense with Hurts and, maybe a little bit of like a wildcat type game that, it could hurt Sanders on the one hand. He's less likely to get passes from Hurts, but on the other hand, if they go with a run heavy game plan, then, there's potentially more opportunities for Sanders. So I think that right now, he's projected for about 8% ownership on DraftKings. I think he's projected for about 8% ownership. I think that's maybe a little bit lower than it should be.
Okay. I guess maybe before we touch on the FanDuel MVP, are you treating the Carson Wentz, Jalen Hurts situation any differently? How are you handling Wentz Hurts?
So I'm not, from a median projection standpoint, I don't think you should treat it too differently. Like you should probably be taking we should be taking a little bit away from Wentz and giving a little bit extra to Hurts. But I think if Wentz plays reasonably well, the most likely outcome is that you're just going to get, I think the report was that they're planning on having Hurts play like a few consecutive plays as opposed to just coming in and leaving. And they're not planning on having them on the field at the same time necessarily. So I think if Wentz, it feels like it's the most likely outcome is that if Wentz plays like a normal quarterback, you would have Hurts coming in, stealing some snaps, but that would kind of be the end of it. If Wentz plays poorly, I think that his leash has just gotten even shorter, which would be the floor concern for him. I think it's even lower. And it's one thing I did consider in cash games is that, normally you kind of want to get both quarterbacks, even if the other quarterback has question marks. With Wentz, I think it's a little bit less appealing to be paying a full quarterback price tag for him when we have no idea how quickly he's going to get yanked if he plays like he has all season long.
Yeah. In everything that I've looked at so far, I assume I don't have a ton of interest in Wentz, certainly in the captain spot. Utility is a little bit different a question. And with Jalen Hurts' price, he's just simply too expensive on DraftKings for me to be ultra interested. There's just too many guys around him that don't really matter all that much. If we switch over to the FanDuel side now, I assume Russell Wilson is your favorite MVP option?
Yeah, I don't really see a way around that since you're not even spending any, extra money for that.
Right. If I look at the projections now, God bless Alex Baker. Russell Wilson projected for 23.7 fantasy points on FanDuel. Next closest guy, Tyler Lockett at 14.7. So, basically 9 fantasy points ahead. And there's no penalty for rostering Russell Wilson in the MVP spot. If you were going to go a different direction at MVP, is there a spot that stands out to you? I'm just looking at the ownership as of right now. Russell Wilson clearly at the top. Wentz and Lockett in a similar area, 10 to 15 range. And then we sort of just start splitting out everybody else.
I think Chris Carson on FanDuel looks maybe a little bit underowned. I think he's probably underowned on DraftKings too, but I mentioned Sanders there. But one thing that I do like about Carson on FanDuel, if you weren't rostering Wilson in tournaments, because of the pricing not changing, like it makes Wilson just so clearly the top captain play that you need Wilson to have a bad game for him not to be the top captain guy. It's not like DraftKings where you can make up for it potentially by who else you were able to get into your lineup. So the easiest way to think of that Wilson isn't the best captain is that a disproportionate amount of Seattle's touchdowns go to the running game, which would most likely be Chris Carson. So I think on FanDuel, he makes sense in that regard.
Yeah, I agree with you on that spot as well. Just looking at my sim results, I'd be happy to get to either DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett in the MVP spot. I think both of them are going a little bit under-owned. In those situations, you're basically just hoping that they concentrate the touchdown luck enough that it laps Russell Wilson, because Wilson is very clearly the highest projected guy in Alex's projections. Is there anybody else you have your eye on at captain or at MVP? Somebody, maybe down the list, a little bit of a flyer?
Not really on FanDuel. It just seems, it seems kind of unnecessary since Wilson is not expected to get as much ownership as, he really should. If you're playing like the Millie or something like that, there's always merit, I think, to going with one of the wide receivers and just hoping that, they break the slate open at 3 or 4% ownership, somebody like Travis Fulgham or something like that. But other than that, if you're thinking about, some smaller field tournaments where you probably don't have to have, or maybe you don't have to have like the literal best possible lineup and you're not quite as concerned about ownership, I think it's just going to be Wilson and then Carson is the top two.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're on the same page there. So I've got 2 props for you from No House Advantage. I already mentioned one of them. Russell Wilson over under 2.5 passing TDs. That one's that felt high to me. I mean, it's not, but 2.5's a lot. Yeah,
2.5's a lot. I think it's about where it should be. I wouldn't feel super comfortable taking either side, which, typically means it's a pretty good line. If I had to take a side, I would take the under. But I think it's just a good line.
I see it as just so much easier to think okay, well, what if Chris Carson just gets those touchdowns? What if Russell Wilson gets that touchdown on the ground?
Right.
I think it's a much easier path to getting that under 2.5 than over. We're going to go to the opposite side of this game. Carson Wentz, 276.5 passing yards. You want the over or the under in that spot? Because obviously, naturally, it seems like under.
Yeah, I want the under on that one. I think projection-wise, it doesn't seem that close for me. You're accounting for there's just so many ways for that to fail. Wentz plays like he has all season long. Hurts plays more snaps than we're expecting, or than he has. There's, I think, plenty of ways for him not to get there.
We're running a promo for Cyber Monday, so we're going to talk about this right now. This promo code is not active as I'm saying this. It will not be active until Live Before Lock is over. The last time we ran a promo on Cyber Monday like this, we broke the website. We don't want to go down that path again. We don't want to do that to you guys. So it's been temporarily paused, but it has been up. If you use the promo code BLUE, BLUE, when you sign up, you get a week of Awesemo Plus for $1. You get the whole shebang: projections, ownership, Slack chat, lineup builder, Everything that we have, you get access to it. It's the Awesemo Plus weekly package for $1 when you use the promo code BLUE. And this will be active again once lock happens, because we don't want to lose the website tonight. One caveat, this does not include Fantasy Cruncher, so be ready for that. But everything on the Awesemo.com website is available in this promo. It's one of the best promos we'll run all year. Cyber Monday is a big one for us, so we're happy to get you in the door if we can. And if that promo is just not your particular cup of tea, our NFL Showdown rankings are free. That doesn't happen after lock. You can go check them out right now. So if you're playing Showdown, you can get Alex's letter grades for everybody, for FanDuel and for DraftKings. So go check out the free content as well. You should be able to see Nightbot or Jordan dropping a link to the Showdown rankings into chat. I think now we can transition over to the flex/utility plays. We can start first and foremost on the flex side for DraftKings, or I guess it's utility on DraftKings, flex on FanDuel. We need we need to just have somebody pick the terminology. Do you prefer flex or utility?
Utility.
Oh, okay. I assumed your answer was going to be, I don't care. I've never thought about it once in my life.
I mean, it is, but I just tried to think about what I normally call it. I think I'm probably like 60-40 calling it utility.
Okay. So at the utility spot, highest owned, and this should not be surprising, Russell Wilson. And then we get into just a sea of 30% type guys. Metcalf, Lockett, Wentz, Carson, Miles Sanders. Who stands out to you at the top? Who do you want most in your utility spot?
Chris Carson, again, looking like he's just going under-owned in general, but also, at the utility position, just like at the captain position. It's a Seahawks team that should score a lot of points. And, obviously we've seen Russell Wilson do it all year long, but it's not like Chris Carson isn't good. It's not like he doesn't get opportunities. So I think that he's kind of the natural way to maybe get away from some of the ownership going to the passing game, but it's not like you're doing it in a way that is like really suboptimal. Like Chris Carson still has tons of touchdown equity. So, I don't really know why his ownership's not higher than it is, but I think he looks a little bit under-owned. Obviously, Metcalf and Lockett both. Metcalf's a lot more expensive, but they're both owned about where they should be, I think. So no real preference on either of them.
Okay. For right now, Sanders and Carson are popping up in my sim results as being a little bit under-owned. I posted a link to my updates a little bit earlier on my Twitter feed. I post Showdown videos for those that don't know for every main Showdown slate, so the Mondays and Thursdays. Those videos went out earlier today. Some other guys that I have my eye on, Travis Fulgham, Dallas Goedert. I don't mind the kickers all that much. I certainly prefer the Seahawks defense to the Eagles defense, but I don't get the sense that I'm going to have much of either. Do you anticipate getting a lot of kickers and or defenses today?
Not really anticipating getting defenses. That's just not a strategy I normally go to anyway. Normally don't go to kickers all that often, especially in tournaments. In cash games, I'm more willing to do it. But Jason Myers at 4,200 on DraftKings, I think is a perfectly fine salary. There's not a whole lot around the kickers, which is something I think normally makes a difference. Like you have Myers at 4,200, you have Jake Elliott at 4K. When you're looking elsewhere in that price range, you have Will Disley, who has some value with Greg Olsen out, but it's kind of I think a toss-up, who benefits more between him and Jacob Hollister. You have David Moore at 4,600, do with that what you will, but there's no like really strong play, I don't think, in that same price range.
This is going to be a tricky question. Is there anybody that you see that you want to naturally pay down a ton for? Let's say someone like potentially Boston Scott at $1,000. Do you want to go anywhere lower than that? Is it a $200 Freddie Swain game? People have been talking about Colby Parkinson. That potential, I don't know. Are you trying to spend anything ultra cheap today?
So the thing for me is that we're getting ownership going to the cheap guys that I'd be most interested in. Jacob Hollister getting like almost 18% utility ownership on DraftKings. Boston Scott at 1K. Like I think that's a good value as far as the upside goes. Sanders obviously is ahead of him in the pecking order, but Scott gets enough opportunities typically to pay off a 1K salary, but he's getting ownership as well. And I think a big reason for that is that you're going to be forced to go to some cheap guys to be able to get the Wilson, Lockett, or Metcalf stacks. So I think it's naturally going to kind of drive ownership on those guys up. Not super cheap, but with the ownership going to Hollister, I think you can look to Will Disley, who in the past has been a capable receiving tight end for the Seahawks. He had a couple major injuries, I believe the most recent being an Achilles injury. So, there's questions, I guess, about how, if he's still the same player. But Hollister's been a little bit more involved as far as targets go. But Disley outsnapped him last week, I think like 43-15, something in that range. And snap counts obviously aren't everything. It matters, if you're running routes or in there to block. But knowing that Disley has been used as a pass catcher previously in his career, knowing that now Olsen is out and that he's been outsnapping Hollister, I think that at their respective price points, I would rather go to Hollister. But when you start thinking about the ownership and you're getting almost 18% going to Hollister and 7% going to Disley, I think Disley starts to have some value.
Okay. Anybody else that we haven't hit on from the utility side on DraftKings? Guys that you think are underrepresented, overrepresented? Anybody that you think, is there any situation where you want to go to Jalen Hurts at 7,200? Like how much would he have to play for that to be viable for you?
It's kind of interesting to me because he's only 7% owned, and it's so hard on single game slates to get like a sub 10% owned guy that in any possible way, barring injury, could be like a legit difference maker. Yeah. And so it's kind of a tough call for me. I think a lot would come down to what tournament you're playing. Like if you're playing, the Millie Maker versus playing like a 3-max tournament, because I think that when you like in terms of just likelihood of success, I don't think it's that high for Hurts at that price tag, because I think the most likely outcome, I think, is that Hurts is more involved than he has been, but still isn't involved enough to pay off 7,200. But I think that like if you played this game 1,000 times, there's definitely games in there where Wentz plays poorly and or Hurts comes in and does something like really good, and they just let Hurts run and go with it. And when that happens, he's clearly underpriced. It's just I don't think it's going to happen that often. So it would really depend for me what size tournament you're playing, how interested I am in Hurts.
Yeah, it trips me up a little bit just thinking, like, if I knew he scored a rushing touchdown, I'm not sure that he should even be all that owned. You kind of need probably like 12 to 15 fantasy points or so at that price tag, with a lot of failure, slightly higher and slightly lower. I think it gets a little tricky to go to Hurts. I think he's a little bit more available on FanDuel, where he's 6,500, just because the prices are a little bit different. Would you be able to get to Hurts there? Would you prefer him more on FanDuel or DraftKings?
I think the price is better on FanDuel. You know what it really reminds me of is, you don't talk about it as much in football, but in basketball, you kind of have like two different ranges of outcomes. You have their minutes range of outcomes and you have their like production range of outcomes. Normally in football, it's basically just you're talking about production. But Hurts kind of reminds me of like when you have a really foul prone starting center and then you have like Mitchell Robinson behind him. And it's kind of like Mitchell Robinson probably isn't worth his salary, but if he gets on the floor for 25 minutes, he's going to smash his salary. It's kind of like not a middle ground. That's kind of what it reminds me of here. And it's always hard to deal with those players. And again, a lot just goes back to how big of a tournament you're playing.
So what you're telling me is that Jalen Hurts is Boban.
Jalen Hurts is Mitchell Robinson.
Sure. I'll take that too.
But yeah, Boban works too. That's
okay. Let's slide over to the flex spot on FanDuel for a little bit, touch on some of the better plays there. How do you feel about going all the way up to Russell Wilson in the flex? 16.5 is a pretty healthy salary, $2,000 clear of Carson Wentz, $2,500 clear of DK Metcalf. If he's not in the MVP spot, are you likely to get a lot of Russell Wilson in the flex? Can he be worth the salary there?
It kind of seems to me like if you're not going, again, because of the salary not changing, that if you're not going to Wilson at captain, you're probably better off like just not going to Wilson. I guess you could make the argument for like putting one of the Seahawks receivers in flex and hoping that Wilson throws 3 touchdowns to DK Metcalf or something, and Metcalf would be the priority there. It's a little bit tougher on FanDuel though, because of it being half-point PPR instead of full point. It's a little tougher for the receivers to put up those monster scores. But I think in that regard, like if you were going Metcalf or Lockett, Wilson still makes sense at flex. But if like you're going with Carson Wentz at I guess Wentz is a bad example too, since he's a quarterback. But if you're going with like Chris Carson or Miles Sanders or Travis Fulgham or basically anybody that isn't the opposing quarterback or one of Wilson's receivers, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to have Wilson at flex at that point.
Yeah. So in my sim results, Russell Wilson is very clearly the guy that shows up in the optimal lineup, regardless of spot. more than anybody else. 35% in the MVP spot, 36% in the flex. His flex ownership is significantly higher than that. I don't love the idea of getting there all that often, just because it's so much money for no multiplier whatsoever. And I think that I can get a comparable output a little bit lower. Favorite flex guys for me on FanDuel right now: Chris Carson at 11.5, Travis Fulgham at 9K, probably my favorite play on Carson and Fulgham are probably my favorite two plays on FanDuel. Slight lean to Fulgham, and just that 9K really opens you up to kind of any sort of construction. That's a pretty nice salary for a guy around 10 fantasy points. Anybody standing out to you that you want to get to significantly more than the field?
No, I mean, I'm with you on Fulgham, I think, just because, again, it's a weak Seahawks defense, and somebody needs to catch the ball. He's pretty cheap at 9K. He does look under-owned, him and Goddard both. But outside of them, not really.
Okay. Any pay down options on FanDuel that stand out as viable? It's obviously a very different pay down structure compared to DraftKings, where you can get guys for like $200. Is there a floor for you in terms of guys that you would look at? I'm guessing Will Dissly at 6K is kind of it.
Yeah, and even that, it's just not quite as necessary, I don't think, on FanDuel, because the pricing's pretty soft. You have like a really underpriced mid-range when you talk about having, Fulgham and Rieger and Greg Ward at 7,500. Like on DraftKings, that mid-range doesn't really exist like it does on FanDuel. So I think that finding those like not very good value plays on DraftKings is a lot more important.
Yeah, I'm of the same opinion. Is there anything else you want to touch on from DraftKings or from FanDuel right now?
No, I don't.
Anything that stands out from anything that you're looking at?
I don't think, like, in addition to what we've talked about.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's like sort of a cut and dry slate. There's not a lot of guys that I see as like wild flyers like we see sometimes. I mean, you've got Lockett and Metcalf on the Seattle side, and it's like, yeah, those guys put up, one of those two guys are probably going to just go bonkers, or Seattle gets smacked.
Well, yeah, and it's that even if you look beyond that, it's not like David Moore is cheap. Like,
right.
David Moore is the guy normally you look to and you're like, oh, well, he's a wide receiver for the Seahawks, so he has potential just for that reason, but he's priced for it. There's not really anyone drastically underpriced from an upside standpoint, with the exception of the guys that we've talked about that are already getting a bunch of ownership in, Boston Scott and Jacob Hollister.
I just don't have anything. I'm loading up on Travis. I'm just putting it out there. I'm loading up on Travis Fulgham. I'm loading up on Chris Carson. They're going to be the two guys that I'm like sort of hitching my wagon to, that are a little bit lower in ownership, like lower 30s or mid 20s. What'd you say?
I think I have them in both my lineups.
Okay. Anything that seems obvious to you from a cash perspective today?
Russell Wilson MVP on FanDuel, I think, goes without saying.
Yeah.
DraftKings, I think it's a little bit. There's at least a little bit of a decision there. I think you could go Wilson or Lockett. Right now, I'm leaning towards going Wilson. That might just be because I got burned going with the non-quarterback last night, and I'm giving in the recency bias. But yeah, I mean, I think those are pretty much the two guys you're looking at on DraftKings. Jason Myers, I think, once again fits in pretty well from a DraftKings cash build. You kind of just end up in that spot, and there's not much around him that gives you the same like point floor. On FanDuel, I think he fits into the build as well. He was kind of in a 2v2 I was looking at, but I sided with going with two guys that actually catch passes as opposed to a kicker. DraftKings, though, with that extra spot, I think he fits in pretty nicely.
One last thing that we need to touch on before we turn this over to EMac and Kyle for Live Before Lock. We've got a giveaway, so it's not even just the promo that we need to talk about. Head to our Twitter account at Awesemo_com. Check out the pinned tweet. We're giving away $250. Who doesn't want free money? All you have to do is reply to the tweet with the question, with an answer to the question: will Carson Wentz or Russell Wilson have more passing yards tonight? If you get it right, one random winner will be selected. All you have to do, reply to that tweet, follow Awesemo_com and at Awesemo NFL. Follow myself, Josh Engleman, at Josh Engleman, and Ship My Money DFS on Twitter as well. That'll help us out. And like that tweet, as long as you do all of that by 8:20, you have a chance to win $250 and you don't have to do anything else. You can't beat it. Again, we're turning it over to EMac and Kyle shortly, but I think we could take a question or two from Premium Slack / YouTube. So let's see what we've got right now. And I think I did actually miss a super chat earlier from D Owens 89. I don't totally know the answer or how to answer this question, but maybe you do. Is Carson plus Hyde plus Seahawks D too thin?
I think so, just because of the pricing. Hyde being 7K on DraftKings, I think makes it like you're allocating in that case what, like almost 16K to or over, almost 16K to Carson and Hyde, 15.8. It's tough to see like how they both put up scores to win. I mean, I guess basically you're hoping for like, 21-7 or 24-7 like Seahawks win where they account for all 3 touchdowns and maybe the Seahawks get interceptions. Like it can work. It's pretty thin though.
Yeah, that one's going to be a tough one for me. The contest that you're in matters a ton. If that's a 100-person single entry or something, yes, you are significantly too thin. If you're trying to win the millie and you're not looking to chop all that often, might need to go a little bit further off the beaten path.
It's definitely within that realm where, you and I have talked about it a lot, where when you're like correlation is great and everything, but when you're talking about a 1-game slate, a lot of times that's outweighed by ownership. Like doing something that doesn't really make sense from a correlation standpoint can still work out in a 1-game sample, and people won't play it, which is really valuable. It's definitely in that realm where you can explain pretty easily how you end up with a Carson Hyde Seahawks team that wins. It's just still a really, really low probability thing.
Do we have any other questions? Here's a good one. Robert Griffin or Ben Roethlisberger? Yeah, it's amazing that that's a question in 2020. This doesn't have anything to do with DFS for today, but would you rather have Wentz or Trubisky?
Wentz.
It's probably closer than it should be. What about grabbing both kickers and both defenses? I'd probably skip that one.
Yeah, I mean, you need to score points somehow.
Yeah. It's not going to be my personal cup of tea. Premium Slack, nothing coming in here, but we're about a minute from getting out of here and turning it over to EMac and Kyle. I'm looking for a question. Dave, okay, here we go. 9,500 left on FanDuel. David Moore or Jalen Reagor?
You said David Moore or Jalen Reagor?
Yes.
Jalen Reagor.
Okay.
I just think, he has the path at least to like be the guy for the Eagles, whereas David Moore, unless he happens to house like 2 of the 4 passes he catches, isn't doing it.
No site given, but Boston Scott or Carlos Hyde?
I mean, assuming salaries, like Scott at 1K.
Sure. We're on the same page there. One more question. 1,400 people in here right now. That's amazing. I have to do this so that I can get them under our counter, but we've got 150 likes and almost 1,500 people here. Hit that thumbs up. It would help us out a ton. Let's get that number north of 300. It's about that time. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell. Plenty of content coming up for the rest of the week. I'll have Showdown videos out on Wednesday now, not tomorrow, if that Steelers and Ravens game ever happens. Tomorrow will be light on the NFL. Final thoughts before we get out of here.
Good luck.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. Good luck. Guys, thank you for joining us. We love having you guys. Be ready. Promo code BLUE for Cyber Monday will be activated once lock happens so that we don't crash the website. Go sign up. You get premium for $1. Can't beat it. Jordan Klein, hit that music. We'll see you guys, I don't know, Thursday, Wednesday. We'll see you.
Yeah.
Oh, I got the cabbage, but I'm going to get him to do the running man.
Oh, no.
It's electric. Boogie, boogie, boogie. All right, Awesemo, here we go. We're kicking it off here. It is the Live Before Lock after Live Before Lock show. It's your old pal EMac coming to you with Kyle Dvorchak as we bring on the Seattle Seahawks, the Philadelphia Eagles. I wanted Lofty as a guest host. Didn't work. He dodged me. He ducked me. So instead, I made a promo code, made a deal with the social media guys to take promo code BLUE, as in Seahawk Blue. You're going to want to use that after this show because you're going to get 1 full week of it's all Awesemo content. Everything for $1. Promo code BLUE. That is not active right now. We did the same promo or a similar promo last year on Black Friday. Crashed the site before NBA lock. Because remember, NBA used to start in October until 2020, but here we are. So that we'll turn that on. We'll stay on for a few minutes afterwards. We'll talk about it, but that is the best deal you're going to get right now. And you get a full week of everything. We've got some CSGO or CSGF, Counter-Strike Global Offensive. We've got League of Legends, of course, NFL. Double header on Monday next week. Heck, could be a triple header depending on what happens with Baltimore and Pittsburgh. Although technically Baltimore's playing next Monday as well. But here we are, Kyle. We got the inactives. Nothing crazy. We have both David Moore and Freddie Swain playing for Seattle. We have Chris Carson. We're going to see him for the first time in about 4 weeks. And we have potential quarterback controversy that we're going to watch play out live. Carson, I'm no longer the franchise Wentz. And Jalen, I have a lot of draft capital tied up with me Hurts, are going to be not sharing the field as they had in their last 31, or in Jalen Hurts, only 31 snaps thus far this season. This is a lot to unpack. We've got rules. We've got no house advantage. We've got groups. We've got everything. What is the key thing for tonight? Let's focus first on Hurts and Wentz, because that's the, I always say, put in your lineups, wave goodbye to the money, hope some of it comes back. That's really what you're doing if you're playing either one of those guys. Take us through that approach, because that's everybody's big question.
Yeah, I mean, Hurts wasn't I think we have this maybe preconceived notion that he could, at least some people I'm sure have this preconceived notion that he is like Taysom Hill, and sure, he's arguably been used outside of the, being a punt gunner, he's been used like Taysom Hill, comes in as a gadget, gets a few snaps, and I swear he's fumbled on so many of his snaps, but comes in as a gadget, doesn't get used much. But he was a good college quarterback. He was one of the better, more efficient. He was playing Big 12 teams. He was just everyone puts up numbers there. So take it for a grain of salt if you want. But he looked like an efficient, NFL caliber passer. So I think they're actually going to use him not in such a gimmicky way. He is just getting drives because they want to know what to do with Carson Wentz if he's a guy that they're trying to move on from. He leads, and by PFF, he leads the league by a considerable margin in turnover-worthy plays, and he takes a ton of sacks. The offensive line certainly doesn't help. So for that reason, I don't think they're just saying, we want to give a weirder look to our opponents. I really do think that the Eagles are interested in knowing what they have in Hurts, whether or not he's a guy that can at least be their backup and potentially be their starter going forward. So sure, he'll come in and run when he's on the field because he projects to run more than most quarterbacks, frankly. But I do think he just takes it's a committee quarterback backfield. I think it will look a little bit like we see with just some straight up backfields where if one of them gets hot, either one, they will probably stay on for most of the rest of the game. If one of them comes out like Ronald Jones, if one of them comes out and just makes this dumb mistake, we could not see them for the rest of the game. So it puts a lot of variance into either of these guys with, I believe at 10.4K Carson Wentz, that price seems so much to pay for someone that unless he comes out and throws 10% on his first 2 drives, he probably ends up getting subbed anyways, just to see what they have in their other quarterback. And if he comes out and bombs in his first drive or 2, he might not take the field again. So his price for a committee quarterback is difficult to pay, and it's difficult to pay up for Jalen Hurts as a committee quarterback as well. I think mostly I'm just staying away. Maybe if the sentiment goes too far, you could go to Wentz as a really big, really wrinkly brain play in the large field Millie Maker stuff. But I mean, it just seems like the points per dollar simply aren't there when you're not getting an entire game as a quarterback, which is mostly unheard of going into games, at least. Obviously, it happens in the middle of games, but to be able to predict this, it's mostly unheard of, and our projections do not like it.
Yeah, and that's the hardest thing, because this can play out a variety of ways. You get to hear, if you guys caught the show earlier today, it's out in podcast form, as are all of our Awesemo shows, with the exception of the Live Before Lock series. Comes out on the Awesemo Podcast Network, available on any podcast platform that you can think of. You got to hear Lofty's take. Lofty is the I was going to say true blue. He is the dyed-in-the-wool Eagles green fan, and he said he doesn't even know what's going to happen. There's this could play out a variety of ways, and we just don't know. So here's the options. Wentz does poorly in his first couple opportunities. We're probably going to see Hurts the rest of the way. In the back of their mind, they have their half game out of the NFC least for the playoffs, but does that even matter? At this point, do you even care with such a discombobulated franchise of getting your ass kicked in the first round? I say that as a Seahawks fan who got into the playoffs in 7-9, and we had Beastquake going against the New Orleans Saints, and they got to go on to the next round, right? So anything can happen any given Sunday. That's what they say. But what are we going to do with Hurts? So you're hoping he gets a rushing touchdown or two. Yes. I think you're looking at Taysom Hill type production, but he's going to have to do it best case scenario on 2/3 of the snaps that Hill's going to get.
Exactly.
What if Wentz just has the game of his life? Are they going to bench him? We don't know. Is Hurts coming in for situations? Is he coming in for full drives? We don't know any of this. So that's what makes it very, very difficult. That was topic one. Topic two, because I say I'm out of touch here in the chat. Topic two, how much Russell Wilson is too much Russell Wilson?
You could argue to lock him in at least in like a minimum of flex or captain. Like there's a strong argument that you should just lock him in. Like I think maybe in the largest tournaments, like there are some interesting leverage plays. Like if you say Chris Carson goes out and scores 2 red zone touchdowns, maybe that means that Russell Wilson doesn't get there. But like quarterback scoring is such high floor because they generally go for 200 or 300 yards. They Russell Wilson has some rushing equity. So the problem is I don't know if you could really make an argument to just outright fade him. I think when I'm, I'll probably say at some point that I'm probably fading him at captain. It's exclusively at captain. I don't think there's any reason to say you shouldn't be playing him in the flex. It would only be to get like massively different. And it's not like he's so correlated with his receivers. It's not like you are paying up for, let's say you go contrarian and you go like Miles Sanders captain. The receivers on the other side aren't costing you a ton. It's not like, well, there are 2 incredible receivers on the Eagles that I want to pay up for. There's not a ton of other ways to pay up on this slate. So if you pay up for even like Travis, or pay up, say you pivot to like a Travis Fulgham at captain or whatever, what you're doing with the rest of the lineup, like you have now saved a lot of money. Either you're not spending much of that money at all and you're betting on probably a massive under and an Eagles upset. Like that's maybe the only scenario in which Russell Wilson doesn't end up being the optimal captain. And even then the optimal, like an optimal flex play, that 2 through 6 percentage on the top Showdown single game plays tool. The only way he doesn't get that, like it's hard to imagine. So no, I think no amount of Russell Wilson is too much. I don't think there's a number you could really put on it outside of like 100. So I definitely an argument to fade him at captain because he is going to be the most popular captain by a pretty considerable margin. Outside of that, I can't really pitch you a good idea other than it will be unique as to why you wouldn't play him at a minimum of a flex.
Yeah, absolutely. On DK, of course, we get that 50% price boost or discount, depending on how you look at it between captain and flex. FanDuel, he's by far the best play. So it makes it hard to, Adam had a good point on the earlier show. If you're not playing him in the MVP slot over there, you're probably best not playing him. And you're hoping something goes seriously amiss. At that point, you would probably want to look at like Chris Carson as your captain and hope that there's some rushing touchdowns. All right, couple free things we have tonight. Dropping the link into chat. Showdown rankings are free this evening. Again, we have that excellent Cyber Monday deal that ends tonight. It is not live right now. We'll turn it on after the show. But for $1, you get 1 week of all Awesemo premium content. And then we also have a giveaway over on Twitter. It is the pinned tweet. Just because I like you guys, I'm going to drop that into Slack as well. But what you got to do is answer the question, will Carson Wentz or Russell Wilson have more passing yards tonight? If you get that correct, you will be put into a drawing for 1 full year of Awesemo Premium NFL. It's a pretty good deal there. You can choose when you want to start that. I bet if you start it now, we'll still roll it over for as many weeks as it goes for next year. Or you can start. Laffy had a good idea. I did listen to his podcast earlier today, and he said, hey, why don't you fire that up in July when we're doing best ball, season long, and all the good stuff. And you get sort of 2 seasons worth of information. All right, let's go by position, by team here. Again, we got Seahawks, when I pulled down the data, 27.5 implied total. My points being Philadelphia, are you ready, has the 20th passing DVOA, but somehow they're only allowing 209 yards per game. How does that happen? Are they good? No. Here's who they faced: Dwayne Haskins, CJ Beathard, Nick Mullins, Daniel Jones twice, Ben DiNucci, Baker Mayfield.
Dude,
you play those guys, you're gonna look pretty good. So careful with what you're looking at there for the averages and some of this information. We know Russell Wilson is 3rd in the league with just shy of 300 passing yards per game. He leads the league with 30 touchdowns. And though he's been a little struggled a little bit the last couple of games, 4 passing touchdowns over his last 3 games, he has failed to top 250 yards twice. He's only missed out on 250 yards 3 times this season. 2 of them happened to be in the last 3 games. By the way, one of those was 248 yards. So depending on where you choose that break point, it's a little different. So we like Russ Wilson. Question 1, do you put a rule in to have him with one of his pass catchers, and then dovetailing in, and we'll circle back on Carson, but dovetailing into the pass catching game, do you want to play Lockett and Metcalf in the same lineup? Are you setting a rule against it? How are you playing that? Because that's our next decision point as we move down the decision tree.
So I think you can play Lockett and Metcalf in the same lineup. I wouldn't be like too keen to do it because it probably means you're playing Russell Wilson in that lineup in captain specifically, because for both of them to get there, like one, we could just have a low scoring game where the prices don't matter as much. You're okay for paying for like a 13-14 DK in a 25-point Tyler Lockett game. Like, sure, it's not it doesn't seem like an optimal spend of your salary, but if the game really does hit like just a low across the board scoring, sure. In that scenario, then yeah, you're probably paying up for guys who don't project as great points per dollar values, but no one ended up being a great points per dollar value. So in that scenario, you can go with like multiple receivers and Russell Wilson and pay down elsewhere. It'd be really difficult though. That's a lot of money to spend. And maybe most importantly, I think if you're doing that, you're probably building a fairly like vanilla lineup. You can do it for sure, but you're basically taking the punt plays that everyone else is taking. You're taking the receivers and the quarterback everyone else is taking, and there's kind of no in between. There's be really difficult to find a way to build a unique lineup that way. And you're taking the most popular quarterback likely at captain, because if both of those guys get there, probably means Russell Wilson just went nuclear, because like for them to both pay off their fairly high salaries, especially DK Metcalf's, you likely need like 100 yards and a touchdown from both. That means you've built like one of the more chalky types of lineups possible. So for me, I don't think it's insane to play them. I think just philosophically, I'm not building that much of a likely to be duplicated lineup, and one that I don't think I'm getting any leverage at captain, because I'm not playing a ton of Russell Wilson. He's simply just really highly owned, playing a ton of him in the flex, locking him in at the flex even. Not playing him in captain, and for that reason, if I'm not playing him at captain, I've already said that I have to play him at captain if I'm playing both receivers for the most part. So I'm not playing both receivers. I don't think you can't do it. I don't think it's impossible for it to hit. It's just simply the way I'm building leverage into my lineups will not be featuring that, but I wouldn't fault anyone for going for it. And I guess maybe the only way I guess the only way I'd really be heavily in on like Russ at captain is if you're playing multiple of these weird guys, like a David Moore, Jacob Hollister or something. So that's one way to go. But generally, no, I think not, probably price wise, ownership wise, not looking to like triple all of them.
All right. So a couple different things we got to hit on here. I've got a super chat we'll get to in just a second. I had sent you a message earlier today saying, hey, can we do set a rule where including MVP on D or captain on DK, can we play both receivers and Russell Wilson, say must play 3 of these? However, David Moore is active tonight. That was kind of looking at Swain being elevated to kind of that number 3. That's not happening. Both are active. I'm a little surprised that David Moore is active. Pete Carroll seemed a little iffy during the week. So we've got to, that's a situation where Swain is $200. You can still play him on DK. I was making some wild lineups with Swain and John Hightower, and then I could have anybody else I wanted. Don't know that I want to go there. So that's kind of the question. If you were playing one or the other, do you have a preference over Lockett versus Metcalf? Now, here's a little, the things I wanted to point out here are the vast majority of Lockett's production has come in 2 meetings with Arizona, including 1 game that went nearly the entire overtime period. In those games, he has 29 targets for 24 catches, 267 yards, and 4 touchdowns. In his other 8 games, he has 43 catches, 480 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So he's very, very, very boom or bust. And 2 of them happen to come against Arizona, where they played the Seahawks a particular way. On the other side, you have Metcalf, who technically has been more of a steady producer. He has, he's been held in check, I said, over the last 2 games, 5 catches for 74 yards and a touchdown. That's not exciting. I think he's the number 1 lifelong Seahawk fan here. I think he's their number 1 receiver. I like him better. We are paying a little bit more, but he's the guy that I think is, I don't want to say consistent because that's not fair, but I think he is he has, in my opinion, the higher upside than Lockett, even though Lockett's outproduced him already in 2, if not 3 of the best Seahawk receiving performances. I still think blank slate going from kickoff, that Metcalf does have the higher upside. What do you have a lean either way? The pricing is making the field go towards Lockett on both sides.
Yeah, I think I don't think there's going to be a massive discrepancy in ownership between the 2 at captain, because you're going to get most of the captain ownership, at least the plurality of it, going to Russell Wilson. But I do think that given that their fantasy production, I believe, is like within 0.3 points per game of each other or something like that, people are just going to take the savings and go with Lockett. I don't have a strong preference. I will almost always tend to break the way of ownership when I think they're very similar. You get more, it's not surprising. You get more targets overall for Lockett. You get more air yards for Metcalf. They score fairly similarly. It just comes sort of at the expense of each other, and more specifically at the price. It comes at the expense of each other. If they were both cheap, you could play as many of them as you wanted. It's that, when Tyler Lockett goes for 200 yards, how much receiving production is left to go around? I like both of them. I really don't have a strong preference. If ownership breaks one way, which it seems like it probably will in favor of Lockett at least a little bit, sure, I'll go with DK Metcalf. I'm going to have a decent exposure. They're 2 of my highest owned players at captain, because I think when you look at how they score and how Russell Wilson scores, it happens on the exact same plays, obviously. And we've seen generally that basically half of the time you can get Russell Wilson being outscored. At least exactly half of the time his top receiver has outscored him. And if you adjust that on a points per dollar basis, it becomes even more in favor of the receivers. Then you adjust that for the receivers being less owned. I'm really just in on both of them. I think I give a slight lean towards Lockett. I think our top captain, top single game plays tool has him as the better captain option. It's slight. I think both are fine. I think I know for a fact I'm going to be over the field on both of them at captain.
All right. You mentioned the top plays tool. That's one of the nice things that you get here across all of our sports here. Again, we're going to turn on that promotion code where you get 1 week of all access Awesemo premium for $1. So we're not turning it on now, because last time we did our Cyber Monday sale, we broke the site, and it was before NBA lock. We're not going to do that because we already know what happens. Now, we have 2 questions. A freebie from Rob McFadden, who says, Donovan McNabb or Sean Alexander? Well, for me, it's easy. Sean Alexander, because I was at the game where he scored 5 touchdowns against Minnesota, and he was on my season-long team that year. So that was a very exciting game. Plus, for somehow we've 5 touchdowns and a half, everybody got free Taco Bell or something like that. There was some other deal. So that was very, very exciting. I think he had 4 touchdowns in that half, and I think he got 1 in the second half. I forget the details, a little hazy, but I think he had 4 rushing and 1 receiving. So for me, Sean Alexander. Now this one's for you. This is a premium super chat. Orton's Neckbeard asks, Kyle, what kind of shampoo and conditioner do you use, if any?
If any. How could I not?
Well, you're very natural. We learned last night after the show that you don't want to hurt anything. And I'm saying this in a making fun way, but we did learn this about you. So there could be some nefarious byproducts there.
So it is important to know what you're putting. The shampoo I use is cheap. It's just like whatever, like Axe, Old Spice, or whatever. But I make it up with conditioner. I swear, I make it up with conditioner. You use conditioner after you get out of the shower and you leave it in, and it's supposed to treat your hair. And it's because my hair is very curly naturally. Like I have these nice long coils. So I have to have a special product for that. So I have this cheap shampoo, and I know it's lazy of me or whatever, but I try and make it up with a really nice conditioner that it's a fancy process that goes into it, and then I'm just pulling it up anyways. But yes, it is cheap shampoo because I'm lazy, and a very expensive conditioner that you leave in. I don't understand the science behind it, but I believe it works because my hair looks nice whenever it's down.
All right. There we go. That was a worthy super chat. So I wanted to make sure we got that one in. Circling, let's hit tight ends here real quick. So the interesting thing about tight ends tonight, no Greg Olsen. He may be able to come back for the playoffs. I believe, I'm forgetting now, plantar fascia or something like that, some sort of foot injury. He might be back for the playoffs. That's not going to matter tonight, but he has about half of the tight end production with 35 targets, 23 catches, 224 yards, and a touchdown. Will Dissly is playing comparable snaps to him. He's been targeted just 17 times, but I want to point out, while he has been the blocking tight end, that was not his role the last 2 seasons. Now he's dealt with a lot of injuries. Coming into this year, he had played just 10 games for Seattle, 6 last year and 4 the year before. Season cut short with injuries. He came local guy, came out of the University of Washington. Decent guy. He has a good history of touchdowns, so I like him. Jacob Hollister, while he plays on about a quarter of the snaps, has 19 targets, so it feels like he's getting more than Dissly. I don't know that that's how that's going to play out. It all comes down to who's going on, or what's going on in the red zone. So I want to point out this year, kind of an anomaly, just 3 touchdowns to tight ends of Russell Wilson's 30 touchdowns. The 4 seasons coming into this year, 30% of his touchdowns went to the tight end position. That works out to 0.61 per game. So here's what's changed. DK Metcalf, but that's not all happening in the red zone. So I know that Russell Wilson likes to go to the tight ends. We've seen it for many years, and it wasn't just Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham one year had 10, and the other tight ends I think had 6 combined. So it's not like it's just one player getting them. It's just how the Seattle red zone offense works. Pete Carroll has been here forever. We know a lot of things haven't changed. They are letting Russ cook, but I'm okay with the tight ends. But how the hell do we choose between them? There's just smoke screens in front of both of them. We got the history. Guy's been injured a lot, but has the rapport with Russell Wilson. And then you got Hollister. I think he's basically Dissly light. What do you want to do with those guys?
Yeah, I think Dissly light is probably a good way to describe it. And he will, like, I think we see mostly Dissly stepping in. I believe he is the tight end who has run more routes. He has like you said, a very solid history of production as far as like solid. His sample is small, but in that sample, it has always been that he has been both a good touchdown producer, and in the context of a showdown slate, like I think he's averaging like 4 targets for around 40 yards or 4 catches for around like 40 yards. In the context of a showdown slate for his $3K whatever price, that's certainly fine. And the touchdown's just a cherry on top. So I think his small but very, solid history of production, plus like if you want to factor in rapport and just the routes run this year, he's run more routes than Hollister. So for all of those reasons, I think Dissly plays something similar to the Greg Olsen role, which isn't like, it's not like, oh, he steps into this massive role and he's just going to absolutely light it up. But it's a role that we really do have to consider on a showdown slate that is, decent at producing touchdowns. Greg Olsen is actually getting a decent amount of looks in the red zone. And I think Jacob Hollister steps into Hollister plus Dissly, essentially. Hollister's role was mostly non-existent. Dissly's role was a little bit in there. So Hollister is still on the radar. And obviously the Olsen injury puts him far closer to the center of the radar. But it's really Dissly who I think is mostly boosted by the Greg Olsen injury and going on IR.
All right, chat, you are wild tonight. We appreciate that. Yes, I'm kind of ignoring you, but enjoy. Talk amongst yourselves. Please do hit that like button. We're closing in on 2,000 concurrent viewers, which is phenomenal for Monday Night Football here. Definitely hit that subscribe button as we march towards 50,000 subscribers as our goal as we head to New Year's. Running back, we can't forget about that. Then we'll hit defense, and then we'll talk about Philadelphia. We got 35 minutes to go. We're talking about no house advantage. We got all sorts of good stuff coming up for you. Chris Carson back after missing 4 games with the foot injury. He was on the edge of returning a few times, so I think he should be in for a full workload. Kind of a bit of a problem, though. Seattle doesn't always play favorites here. They don't have a bell cow back. We can reach all the way back to several years ago when Mike Davis was getting significant carries in this. We know Carson has a little bit of a fumbling problem, but put your hand in the dirt. He's got a nose for the end zone. 3 rushing touchdowns, 3 receiving touchdowns in basically limited games played thus far this season. So what do we do with him? Carlos Hyde looked pretty good. He is not as dusty as the kids like to say, as one would think. He's always been a capable receiver, just never really asked to play that role. He has played 1 of the last 4 games as Russell Wilson has been, sharing the backfield with DJ Dallas, and Bo Scarborough was in there somehow. Alex Collins, who, Seattle drafted like 4 years ago. He disappeared. It wasn't in the practice squads. It came back. They don't want to activate him because it'll guarantee his salary. There's all sorts of a mess in the backfield. Point is, I don't think they care who's back there. Are they going to force feed Carson? No, but he is arguably the better guy. But you've got Carlos Hyde, who's been a recent facsimile of him. What do you want to do with the Seattle backfield here? Is this a, if not playing Wilson, play Carson type thing? Hope to capture a touchdown, maybe even 2.
Yeah, if you're an absolute mad lad and you're not playing Wilson, I think Carson is the ideal pivot. I think it's even okay to play I think it's okay to use Carson just as leverage off of one of the pass catchers. You don't have to, play 0 pass catchers, 0 Wilson, and go with Carson for all the leverage. I think you can just use him as a way to get leverage off of one of them, saying, well, say Tyler Lockett has a good game and it comes at some of the expense of DK Metcalf, but the other expensive DK Metcalf is Chris Carson punching in 1 from the 1 or whatever. And I think that's what's interesting, because we've seen so much work in general from Carson, especially as a pass catcher, which is just another way that he can steal overall volume from his teammates. So I don't think you have to play Carson absolutely without, I think it's not sacrilegious to play Carson with or without Wilson. I think they can still get there together. His receptions don't really correlate particularly well with Russell Wilson. I think it's just more that if the offense overall does fine moving the ball, Wilson gets 40, 50 yards on a drive, but Carson's the one to punch it in. Wilson can still be the optimal play. That being said, all that said, I just generally do like Carson regardless of if he is leverage or not off of his teammates, and regardless of how you use him specifically. His volume has just been pretty good. It's not great. Seattle, this is very weird to say, given our history of Pete Carroll and Brian Schottenheimer. They've been passing the ball a lot, and it is obviously a good thing that they're doing that. But that means Carson doesn't get a ton of work. Oh man, that man. I'm glad they're doing it now.
This was a picture frame my friend gave me 6 years ago. He's a huge USC fan. When Pete Carroll came to the team, he put it in a frame. He was giving me the frame, but wanted it to be silly, so I just kept Pete Carroll in the frame. But sorry to interrupt, but that's
incredible that
there.
Yeah, it's incredible that it took him this long to figure out how to use Russell Wilson. Which the answer is I'm sure there are ways to maximize how you use him, but really the answer is use him a lot. That's how you optimally use Russell Wilson. And it's finally happening. So that means that Chris Carson getting a very high market share of the backfield work still doesn't relate to a ton. He gets 12.2 carries per game in the games that I believe the games he finished, that is 12.2 carries per game. That's 60 yards on the ground. 4.6 targets per game, though, is really interesting. It doesn't, like I said, correlate super well with Wilson because his targets are, 0 to negative ADOT targets, essentially. So it's not there's great correlation. He's mostly getting his value from the catch itself, which offers nothing to Wilson. But if the offense overall, rising tide, all boats thing. So I think Carson is a really interesting captain play just because if they get to the end zone a few times, you can have Wilson on a quiet night. You've already saved the salary by getting two Chris Carson touchdowns at the goal line. You save some salary by playing a captain. You can still play Wilson and a Lockett. Then you're probably just generally fading all of the rest of the pass catchers, especially Metcalf being the most expensive one. I really just like him in the captain because I think he has such high touchdown equity, and he doesn't share those touchdowns, although he can catch touchdowns. But for the most part, you expect him to score them running. He doesn't share those with anyone, so he really is a unique way to capture points from the offense we should probably be attacking more so. So Carson in captain, in flex, I think is just kind of underrated given the role he saw both as a runner, but also as a pass catcher earlier in the season. Hyde, maybe he takes some work away from Carson, but Hyde was unfortunately priced on the off chance that Chris Carson didn't end up playing. He's like 7K or something. He's a backup running back. At best, he's a backup running back with a bit of a larger role because Chris Carson is coming back from a multi-week injury. But that role, no matter how big it gets, unless Carson gets injured, is just simply not worth the price you have to pay. And I get why they priced him up this way. It's not like an egregious price. It was, you release prices that early. It's what you have to do. You either price him down and, kind of block off one of the flex spots by making everyone play him, or you price him up and now he's kind of a worthless play. So I don't really have any hide just because his price is kind of egregious for his role. Carson, I think on the other end, is at least maybe appropriately priced, but I think his ownership is really where it gets interesting because he's not going to be really owned at captain. His flex ownership is probably not where it should be. I'm simply going to have a lot of Carson.
All right. Leaving no stone unturned, the defense, Philadelphia has allowed at least 3 sacks or more in all but one game. They lead the league as well in sacks allowed. They're third with they have the third most turnovers. Seattle's averaging 2.5 sacks and 1.5 takeaways, despite being on pace to allow more passing yards than anyone in the history of the NFL by like 700 or 800 yards at this point. So yes, the game has changed, but yikes, don't count them out. We have Wentz. We potentially have Jalen Hurts. Who knows what's going to happen, but the Seattle defense is in play. Let's talk a little bit here about No House Advantage. We do have projections for them. They are free. I'm dropping, oops, that's not the No House projections. I'm going to drop those into the YouTube chat here for you. And yikes, that's weird. Wonder what happened. Somehow I copied my entire, there we go. Clear that clipboard. There you go. They're coming in. Well, I was putting in all the projections because I just uploaded them to Fantasy Cruncher for myself, and all of a sudden it gave me a character limit issue. We can't have that. But No House Advantage, definitely check them out. Player prop site. We're not playing against the house. We're playing against each other. Gamers versus gamers, hence the name No House Advantage. Sign up with the promo code Awesemo. Get $20 matched with your first deposit. Refer a friend. Get another $5. Let's look at 2 of the projections that we have. Russell Wilson, 283 yards. He leads the league just shy of 300 per game. As we mentioned, he's only been below 253 times. 283.5. You want to go over or under, Kyle?
I will go with the under there.
Okay.
I'm not sure what our projections have. I guess I'll go with the under.
291.8, technically 291.78. If you really want to know. So we have slightly on the over. Carson Wentz, this is kind of a gimme. Static lines here. So the lines don't adjust. Once they put them out, that's what they are. People are going to go to this one. We have Carson Wentz. Oh my God, great matchup against the Seahawks. The line is 276.5 passing yards. We're projecting him for 203. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the snap count's going to be. Most of the field's probably going to be on the under for that one. So you can utilize accordingly, but we can play all sorts of game formats over there on No House Advantage, GPPs, head-to-heads, etc. Play against your friends. Don't worry about the house, nohouseadvantage.com. All right, let's get over here to Philly. For those of you just coming in, we are cresting towards 1,800 viewers here. Carson Wentz, Jalen Hurts. We do not know what is going to happen with either one. So kind of recapping what we did at the top of the show here, Hurts has played on 31 offensive snaps. Every single one has actually had Carson Wentz on the field. So he was split out as a wide receiver. Why they were doing that, who knows? But Carson didn't even get, Hurts didn't even get anything like the equivalent of Wildcat, or like they used to use Cordell Stewart or anything like that. So very weird that they went that way. But they've said he is going to be on the field by himself. That's it. They're being cagey. Does he get a couple series? Does he get a few snaps? Is it situational? We don't know. This feels like both of these guys, you can do one of two things. Either stay away or get ready to light your money on fire, but be well rewarded if good things happen. And then it's the old Ben Raza. You got to pick which quarterback you think is going to be the guy that gets the most snaps. And then he still has to have a good game. You could get it right and he could fail, and the whole exercise is moot. What are you doing with the quarterbacks? I have set each for 5%, and I really don't want any in my lineups.
Yeah, I think it's the pricing. If they were priced as if they were like committee quarterbacks, then you could absolutely look to him. But like Carson Wentz at 10.4, like I probably wasn't even a good play at that. Like anyways, like he simply like gets there mostly on like passing volume because he's been like an inaccurate and erratic quarterback. Like, I don't know, for me as the underdog against like a defense that although they're obviously not good, they actually put up sacks, which is kind of one thing that Carson Wentz like perfectly struggles with. The only real reason to be excited about Wentz would be his rushing value. But now even that is like everything. His passing, his rushing is going to be limited by simply playing time, which is unheard of for a quarterback, but it is what it is. The pricing is why I'm not going to these guys. I think it is very possible that Wentz comes out, plays well. He has like a good upside. He physically has the tools to be a good quarterback. It's just like, does he do it on a given slate? He could come out, throw a few scores, and kind of silence any Jalen Hurts notions, or the other way around. Like he could come out, get picked off, and Hurts could come in and like run for 50 or 60. It's that their prices make it so that that kind of has to be what you get. If you get anything less than that, your lineup dies. So for that reason, I think like the ceiling is roughly commensurate with their prices. It's the floor that isn't commensurate. It's not even close. It's these guys have floors that are just not reflected in their prices. So I'm really not having much of either of these guys.
All right, and that makes the most sense. Just throwing out a few stats here. Wentz is averaging 232 and a half passing yards per game. He has 14 passing touchdowns, 14 interceptions. He does have 5 rushing touchdowns, career high. He has 8 in his career. 5 of them have happened already. Again, Seattle allowing 343 passing yards per game, but yeah, it's just, this is just too dicey. I do want to point out 8 of the 10 quarterbacks to face the Seahawks have accounted for multiple touchdowns. 7 of them had multiple passing touchdowns. A couple of them had rushing touchdowns. And then you had the Cam Newton game where he had 1 passing touchdown. And I'm trying to block that one out of my memory. But was it 2 or was it 3 rushing touchdowns? There's still nightmares with that one. But pointing out Seattle, bit of a sieve on defense. Seattle's actually been good against the run, 8th best rushing DVOA compared to the 27th passing DVOA. This is called a pass funnel defense. Miles Sanders, what do we do with him? It's been basically a 65-35 split since both he and Boston Scott have been healthy the last 2 games. Sanders, we know, is a 3-down back. We know he's very capable in the passing game. We know he's capable in the downfield passing game. To me, I'm going with him. I don't hate Boston Scott. He's been incredibly efficient. In 3 of his last 4 games, he's had over 74 yards. 2 of those were without Sanders, but that just shows that he does have the ability to do it when the pressure's not entirely on him and the entire DFS world is not on him week 1. I hate you week 1. But what are we doing with the Philadelphia running game?
Yeah, I think because of his price, Boston Scott's certainly in play. Like you said, he gets enough work, like that 25 split is enough that it is at least worth considering at his price. And we saw like he's athletic. He can bust a long touchdown. He had it was either last week or 2 weeks ago that both him and Clement scored when I was like, loading up on Miles Sanders on that week. So that was brutal.
One snap and Clement scored.
Yeah, man, that
one
was
touch. Okay. One snap. Really? Got to do us like that? Come on.
It was brutal. I had a lot of Miles Sanders that week, and I'm going to have a lot of Miles Sanders tonight. He gets the ball a ton. He gets a lot of targets. He gets a lot of carries. And like that 75-25 split, like might not sound like a lot, but like that is a lot of the work. And it's both that way.
65-35 the last 2 games. On the season, it's closer to 75-25. Just want to throw that out there.
In the middle of the season, they stopped almost using Scott entirely. Yeah. And since Sanders has come back, maybe this is a long-term strategy that they think, well, let's dial it back to 2/3, 1/3, because Sanders kind of has gotten hurt like 3 or 4 times, I think, in his less than 2-year NFL career. But maybe they do go back to that early season split, that like mid-season, actually. It's like weeks 3 through probably like 7 or 8 or something, that like we really didn't see much of Scott at all. We've seen a little bit more of him since Sanders has returned to the lineup. Sanders gets a lot of carries, a lot of targets, and the defense, maybe they're a pass funnel, but 1, he still gets a lot of targets, and 2, there's so much variance that goes into any single game that we've kind of like seen that perfect example where Sanders gets buried every single play except breaks off a 74-yard run. It was back-to-back weeks a few weeks ago, 74-yard runs. I think that's not predicting that, but it shows you how much variance goes into any individual play, whether it be, Tyler Lockett versus DK Metcalf or Miles Sanders versus a run funnel attack. He can still get there, especially if he's going to see the work. In his 2 games back, 15.5 carries, 5 targets. Another example of variance, Carson Wentz is just terrible throwing to running backs. Like Sanders' catch rate for a running back is pretty abysmal. Maybe it's probably at this point a weakness of Carson Wentz. He has a lot of them. But I also think that our most predictive metric is going to simply be volume. I'm going to keep buying the volume. I think both running backs in this game are really interesting leverage plays, specifically at captain because they have so much touchdown equity. And for Sanders, he just has it's a lot of touches. I think there's definitely some concern with Chris Carson that his team is above expectation, passing more than any other team, given, adjusting for the scenarios they're in. They pass at a higher rate than any other team based on our expectations. At least for, Miles Sanders, his team is going to probably run less than expectation or at least less than Seattle runs versus expectation. So he's on a team that is at least willing to give him the ball a lot. He gets a lot of targets, and the defense overall is still very bad. So at least if, they get there through passing, he can still get there in the red zone. So both running backs, I think I give a slight lean towards Sanders because his market share numbers versus the rest of his team, he doesn't compete with the Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf and Russell Wilson for, yardage. He's really only competing with, your Jalen Reagors and Dallas Goederts. Well, I like those guys. It's weaker competition for sure. So Miles Sanders, of all the Eagles guys, is easily my favorite captain.
All right, moving to the Eagles receivers. Let's look at our notes here. So my notes say, despite this being a cherry matchup, the uncertainty at quarterback somewhat dampens our wide receivers. Over the last 3 games since the return of rookie Jalen Reagor, the opportunities literally have been evenly shared. So we have 4 weeks. There was a week 9 bye, so just 3 games. Fulgham has 7, 5, and 7. Reagor has 6, 7, and 5. Greg Ward has 5, 6, and 4. So that's 19, 18, and 15. John Hightower, no targets in the last 2 weeks, has had 3 back in week 8. Fulgham, despite all this, just has 2 catches for 16 yards in the last 2 weeks. That's on 12 targets. That doesn't seem to be something that'll keep going, continue going forward. We have no Zach Ertz once again. You've got Greg Ward. I think of him as kind of a possession guy, former quarterback / wide receiver / a little bit of running back there, University of Houston back in the day. But Lofty pointed out on his show earlier this morning, why is he even in the league? Or maybe it was Matt, I forget, but neither one of them were very high on him. You've got Dallas Goedert, who is actually more expensive than on DK than any of the wide receivers. You still have Richard Rodgers. People are like, oh, did he just show up with Philadelphia? Isn't he the guy with the Green Bay? This is his 3rd season with Philadelphia. He's had some moments, and we got the quarterback uncertainty. What the hell are we doing here?
Yeah, so the quarterback uncertainty just in general does absolutely dampen the overall projection for this passing attack. And because the quarterback that would be replacing Carson Wentz, even for just a few drives, projects to be a more run-heavy quarterback than, your average one, that probably means that some dropbacks when Jalen Hurts is on the field get converted into rush attempts, if he faces pressure. So I think that is a slight dampener, but you still have to look at the Eagles guys. You can't just ignore them. Dallas Goedert, early in the year, I believe it was the first 2 games, led the team in targets, receptions, receiving yards. So I think that role probably gets scaled back just a little bit. More recently, it's been that he is the 2nd or 3rd receiver in terms of targets, receptions, receiving yards, essentially, because he doesn't have a high 8 at least versus the receivers. Not going to rack up a ton of air yards. And early in the season, their receivers were a game and a half of Deshaun Jackson. They didn't really have Reagor got injured in the 2nd game, I believe, and Travis Fulgham wasn't even a thing yet. So maybe that's why he was getting as much work as he was. Now, I don't think we can quite project that because the receiving core is somehow better. I guess a full-time Jalen Reagor plus Travis Fulgham over Deshaun Jackson is maybe a better swap, basically based on the way Travis Fulgham has played for the most part. I think for me, Fulgham is probably the guy. Our ownership has a pretty significant lean towards Fulgham. I'm kind of surprised. I thought people would be a little more excited to go towards the flashy young 1st-round pick Jalen Reagor, but people are recognizing Fulgham's volume. In the past 2 weeks, I believe it's been 12 targets, and like you said, it was like a catch for 8 yards in both of those games. Yes. I think
twin 8-yard catches.
Yeah,
great.
But the volume was there. The volume was there, and that's what we should be looking for. In the past 3 games, I believe those are the ones Jalen Reagor returned in. He has 1 more target and a handful of more air yards. He gets a slight lean. The price maybe, has a slight lean towards Reagor, obviously. I still am going to buy the overall volume with Fulgham. Reagor, not a bad backup option. The early season on Goddard was very promising, a little less so now. I think because of his price, he kind of slots in as more of a tertiary play, definitely not a core part of the lineups I'm building whereas maybe not, a core part, but Rieger and Fulgham come in as more of like secondary parts. I'm trying to get, I wouldn't set a rule for it, but I am trying to get at least one of them, because if we project this team to be losing a lot, they should be passing. And although it's not great for quarterbacks, like quarterbacks generally get to ceiling games based on efficiency. You get 30 passes, which isn't a lot, but you score 3 times, like the Patrick Mahomes Classic or something like that. Aaron Rodgers does these things too. All the good quarterbacks do it. It's like efficiency matters for quarterbacks. For receivers, it's not quite the same. They can get there based on volume. Ask Allen Robinson's entire career never having an efficient quarterback, and he still gets there. So for me, that puts me a little bit more towards being comfortable, despite completely fading the quarterback situation for the Eagles. I'm still comfortable going some of the pass catchers. I guess if you had me rank them, I would go Fulgham based on the volume and the decent price. Rieger, a little less volume, a good price. And Dallas Goedert, his price just kind of is a little bit incongruous with the volume or lack thereof he's seeing, except for the first 2 games he played, basically.
All right. Pin tweet over on Awesemo_COM on Twitter, Awesemo_COM. Get a chance to win a full season of all access Awesemo Premium NFL. All you got to do is follow the instructions over there. You got to answer the question, who throws for more passing yards tonight? Russell Wilson, Carson Wentz. Hint, probably Russell Wilson. It is 2020. Anything can happen. But you get that right, you go into a drawing. Winner gets a full season, literally the full season of NFL Awesemo Premium content. Check that out over there. Again, one more shout out. Looks like a little overlay brewing there on No House Advantage. When you sign up there at nohouseadvantage.com, utilize the promo code Awesemo and get a $20 deposit match. Refer a friend, get another $5. All right. We've talked about, we haven't talked about kickers yet. Philly defense. Yeah, Wilson throwing a few more interceptions. They're in the mix. We're looking for, as Laffy likes to say, a scoop and score, a pick 6. Chris Baggs would say a splash play, something like that. You can check out those guys throughout the week as well as on the weekend on Awesemo. We have all sorts of content on our YouTube here. The kickers combined, these 2 kickers have 26 field goal attempts this season. I believe there are 3 or 4 other kickers that themselves have more than those guys combined. These teams don't seem to kick a lot of field goals. That is important to know. Anything can happen. Field goals are incredibly fickle, and all it just takes. Where are we in the quarter? What's the score? What's going on? And all of a sudden, your guy can have 3. Neither team really seems to do that. Seattle, because they have the ability to score touchdowns, their opponents, they got to keep up. 3 does not equal 7. Bit of a problem there. That's all I've really got there for the kickers. Anything else, or shall we start taking some questions here?
Yeah, you said it. I think the teams are 29th and 30th in field goal attempts per game, or maybe 28th and 29th. They just don't kick field goals. Seattle, probably because they're an efficient offense who can score touchdowns, and the Eagles aren't very good at offense necessarily, and they are one of the more aggressive teams, both in 4th down and going for 2 situations, having kind of a staff background and a little bit analytics. So neither of them really stick out to me. They're not very expensive, so maybe that's a selling point on them. And like you said, these things are highly, highly random. All it takes is them getting into the red zone and getting one bad holding penalty, and your drive kind of dies there, but it dies in the red zone or whatever. So you got a field goal. All it takes is a dropped touchdown reception, and then NFL teams love running on 1st and 10, so setting themselves up for bad scenarios. So absolutely, there are ways for these kickers to have good nights. It's simply that the sample we have on the season says that these teams don't even straight up kick field goals. So much rather look at the defenses. I would even take, as crazy it sounds, Eagles defense over the kickers, specifically because Russell Wilson is throwing, like you said, more interceptions than usual. And he is historically, and the season no different, taking sacks at one of the highest rates in the league. With, this being a relatively decent scoring environment, that could mean a decent amount of dropbacks for Russell Wilson. And the Seahawks this year has actually played that way, where they don't even care if it's a good scoring environment or not. Shootout, low scoring game, they just throw the ball a lot. So that means extra dropbacks, a potentially high ceiling for the Eagles defense, but definitely a very scary floor. Seahawks defense, I think, is actually pretty well priced, and I'm going to have a decent amount of them. I mean, anytime you get a team desperate enough at quarterback where they're saying they're going to play 2 of them, it's this is a college football thing. If you have multiple quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. I'm gonna subscribe to that for this game because the Seahawks, while they do like on the season, their numbers say they have a pretty bad defense. And that seems like a fair statement to make. They've been good at generating sacks. They've been less healthy in like the early and mid part of the season, getting a little better. Their injury report wasn't quite as scuffed coming into this game. So, and even if they are still bad, I don't care. Like Carson Wentz is also bad. Carson Wentz will just give you some of them. You don't need to be a good defense to take advantage of him. So for that reason, I like Seattle's defense. You can play the Eagles in the Millie. I don't hate it. I guess I'd still take them specifically over the kickers, both of them.
All right. I am dropping 10 $1 head-to-heads there in DK. You guys jump on in there, username EMac, have some fun. I went 7-3. Melissa got me. She was one of the 3 people that beat me. She is now ahead in our series 2-1-1. But I'm out. I'm out tonight for revenge. It's a dish best served cold. Let's see here. We got 7 minutes to go. I should probably make some lineups here. People are asking favorite capped. Guys, we're going to turn on that promo code blue that will get you 1 week of NFL Awesemo after the show. We crashed the site last time we did this contest up to NBA lock. We're not going to do that tonight, but we're gonna bump that live in 8 minutes here for this one. So just a reminder on that. If it's not working for you right now, that was designed. People asking about Alshon Jeffrey. I think he played, I'm trying to remember, 7 snaps last week. I think he had a target. How the mighty have fallen. He's not in my plans tonight. Hightower probably shouldn't be in our plans tonight. Let's talk about Eagles captains. We're getting a few questions about that. In the non-Wentz variety.
I mean, yeah, you can play Wentz at captain. You can do just about anything at captain, especially if it gets unique in these very, very, very large tournaments where, taking down first with 100 people, it's fine. But, does it really, if you're consistently like your ceiling outcome is just simply chopping first, you need to hit a lot of ceiling outcomes for that to actually pay off. So I get why you do something weird and go with like a Wentz at captain, but I won't be doing it. Sanders is my favorite play. I mean, generally, like running backs have a pretty high chance relative to the field, like relative to your tight ends, wide receivers specifically, of being the optimal captain choice. And he doesn't need a good game from Wentz or Hurts to get there. I'm fine. I think it's okay to play either of Rieger or like Travis Fulgham. I wouldn't be going with Goddard. If Goddard was getting like a vast majority of the targets, that's fine. I don't think playing tight end at captain is bad. I know it doesn't hit at a very high rate, but it's because we don't have a lot of good tight ends to do it with. Goddard could have been that earlier in the year based on the target share from his first 2 games. But given that that's a fairly small sample and then he comes back to not seeing he needs a ton of work. It's not that he isn't seeing enough work to play in flex. I like him in flex. He's fine. He's not my favorite Eagles pass catcher, but you can go to him. It's that you just need to see a lot of targets or very downfield targets to be like a good captain play. And he doesn't really seem like he has the upside for either of those. I would say Fulgham probably still my favorite captain. I'm just going to rely on our priors of his volume. Even with Rieger coming back, he's still slightly out targeting, slightly out air yarding him. And Rieger as well. They're both fine. I'm not going to go crazy on them. The guy I'm going over the field on is Sanders by a pretty significant margin.
So we got him right now about 30% in the flex. Where do you see that landing? I'm going to go as high as 60, and I'm going to hit crunch here in just a second.
Miles Sanders?
Yeah, Miles Sanders.
Yeah, 60% I think is fine. I mean, his projection looks pretty dang good in terms of the volume he sees, especially if he can finally start connecting on some of these targets, like the PPR value that adds. I think everything looks good on the Miles Sanders front. Gets a lot of work. He's not egregiously priced, and you have to play someone on the Eagles, unfortunately. So I think he fits all of those.
All right, so I'm going to hit crunch here. Let's see. Hurts at captain feels a little ballsy there. So Wentz should get 40 passes tonight. It is 2020. Let's see. Russell Wilson, 5-0 at Lincoln Financial Field, including playoffs with the Eagles. I was not aware of that. But
adjust the rankings.
Yeah. What Eagles pass catcher is in the best spot today? And Sanders versus Carson.
Sanders versus Carson. I mean, if you have the money, I'd play Sanders. I think he just simply projects for more work. If you're building, like if your lineup, I guess, is less unique, say you've just got like kind of a chalk build up until this point, Carson's probably a more unique play. So that's where I'd go on that. The other one was which Eagles pass catcher in the best spot. I don't know, the volume points to Travis Fulgham. Like I think the best spot to be in is the spot that gets you targeted a lot. And, generally it's one of the stickier stats we have to look at. So I'll go with a slight air yards lean towards and targets lean towards Fulgham over the past few weeks. And before that, he was absolutely smashing.
All right. Jalen Reagor at captain, ?
As long as your tournament is sufficiently large, like it's going to be unique. I think he's talented for what that's worth. And more importantly, he sees, at least in his games back, has seen a decent amount of volume. It's nothing to write home about, but he's also a guy who's like crazy athletic, and early in the season was getting used at like one of the highest ADOTs in the league through his like 2 games that he played. It's a small sample, but like he seems to be playing that Deshaun Jackson role, that modestly to heavily used downfield burner role. All these things seem like they could like induce a lot of volatility in his projection. And a captain, like, is perfect. It's in a tournament, that's absolutely perfect. You can do it. I would just say I'd be looking at the very largest tournaments because you don't need to get that off projection in a 1,000-man tournament.
All right. I am uploading right now, and I ran the same lineup in my NFL cash game, or my cash game lineup yesterday for the main slate, which was not good. So if you want to pontificate for just a moment here, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll say that's a bad idea. You shouldn't play your cash game in
100% Pat Mahomes.
Well, all right, you should. All right, so here's 2 things. You should be playing Patrick Mahomes when you can afford to do so. He's good. Should you be playing the same lineup across everything you do? No. So I feel like, I don't know. I'm not sure if you meant to set me up with an easy slam dunk, but don't do that. I'm going to say, if you're watching right now, don't do it. And personally, EMac, don't do it again.
That was not my proudest moment by any stretch.
I'll keep going. Greg Ward is someone we haven't talked about. Like, the dude just has no upside on his targets. He said that Matt and whoever else were kind of dunking on him. Sorry, I can't bring you any more optimism. And like, sure, he could go out and get a decent amount of targets. Like if the defensive scheme works in a way that, allows that to happen or encourages that to happen. But he's averaging less than like 6 yards per target. His ADOT is like non-existent. He is like the lowest level of Jarvis Landry you could possibly imagine. Maybe certainly that will keep his ownership in check, but like, just, is it worth it to get to him? My opinion, not really. I think it's like not terrible. Like Carlos Hyde is probably a worse projected play, but I'm still not really getting in any Greg Ward. It's just that like he's sort of like I talked about with Dallas Goedert earlier, where like you need to have a lot of targets or a lot of air yards generally, like that's or red zone looks or something like that to have a ceiling day. Dallas Goedert has enough targets that he can have a ceiling day. Like, how many targets does it take, given his ADOT, for Greg Ward to really have a ceiling outcome? It's too many for my liking personally, given that it's not likely to happen because they have good receivers. In the middle of the season, when you're saying, well, they're throwing it to practice squatted players and they're running out 3 tight end sets because they have 2 healthy receivers, sure, Greg Ward can go out and rack up 15 targets or something.
He kind of saved them last year when they were in desperate times. So
yeah, when they're desperate, it makes sense. Like when they are desperate, I'll play Greg Ward because I don't care what your ADOT is if you see 12 targets. It's not going to see 12. It's unlikely, I guess. Certainly it can happen. He's not going to see a ton of targets. He either needs to like score in the red zone, which sure it could happen, or like break a long yards after the catch play. Given that those things just aren't like incredibly likely, not very predictable, the fact that he's got a like non-existent ADOT, he's like basically just like a screen running back. He's like, one of the least upside laden players on a per target basis and doesn't see a lot of targets. So unfortunately, I can't go against what our content said earlier that no Greg Ward for me.
All right. So we're now at lock. We're turning on the promo code BLUE. So that gets you 1 week of all Awesemo premium access. That includes Slack. That includes the college football content that we have. We have some beta college basketball stuff. We have golf behind the scenes behind the paywall premium. We also do Showdown content for each of the slates. I have been playing that most of the year. That was a lot of fun. We have EPL and other soccer content. I've actually been doing quite well in the EPL. I generally build 1 or 2 lineups, and I have about a 14% ROI there. Not bad. Play it on DK, get the crowns, get the bonuses. Just missed out on the black this month. That would have been worth $500 in DK cash. Have to settle for platinum over the next couple months. Mistimed my stuff. We have the esports including Counter-Strike Global Offensive. We have League of Legends. We've got Rocket League. We've got everything that you can think of back here. We've got. So you definitely want to check that out. Just $1. The Awesemo 1 week premium package, promo code BLUE, as in the color blue, as in blue. You're my boy. You're my boy, Blue. That's what you got to think of. All right. I didn't mention my groups tonight. A couple people were messaging me about that. Didn't really have that many, but let me go to my advanced settings here. I ran my usual, just 2 of the kickers and defenses combined. I had Chef Russ, where I said I needed Russ with at least one of his pass catchers. I had the Seattle running backs limited to 1. Don't know that I feel that strongly about them, but with Carlos Hyde priced where he was, I didn't want the randomness to put both of them in there for that one. And then Seattle tight ends, I said just 1 of them. And then I had my special. I ran 10% of my lineups with what I called Super Duper. This was must play 3 of Russ, Lockett, and Metcalf, including the captain spot there on DK. We shall see what happens with that, but that's a lot of salary cap, and we haven't seen both of them have phenomenal games at the same time this season. Could it happen tonight? Sure. I mean, we could see, let's math this out. 28-17, that's really no surprise. A touchdown goes to each of them, and they each approach 100 yards. Mm-hmm. All right, now they're amongst the top 5 scorers, right? And we assume Carson gets one goes to the tight end. Chris Carson gets one goes to the tight end, and all of a sudden things are evenly spreading out, but you're capturing most of the Seahawks touchdowns. Percentages with where I landed, again, I built, well, technically 101 lineups because I had my cash lineup, but defense, I went 18%, Seahawks 14%. Philly, that more or less maths out where the field is. I went 30% Jason Myers. I set that as the cap. That's just what's going to happen. I needed the salary. That was where I was going to go. 10% of Elliott. So I'm above the field by 10% on Myers. I'm below the field by 5 on Elliott. That's fine. This is just, maybe we get some field goal variance on our side. I went 30% Dallas Goedert, 3% Will Dissly. I ended up with 20% Jacob Hollister. I still prefer Will Dissly in this, but the price savings was $2,200. At that point, you're like, I'm just going to roll the dice and hope I land on the touchdown if one of them gets it. Richard Rodgers was at 2. Tyler Lockett, I am at 60% in the flex. Metcalf, I'm at 20. That was a completely pricing function, but I'm going so heavy on Russell Wilson. I needed every dollar I could get. Travis Fulgham, I'm at 40, Fields at 25. Rager, I'm at 29, Fields at 20. David Moore, a little scared on this one. I'm at 30%. I like David Moore. I think he's fine wide receiver 3. I'm a little nervous about that knee injury. They weren't sure he was going to play. He's active. Last year we saw Tyler Lockett active, then had a little stomach bug and put up a 0 in a primetime slate. Some weird stuff can happen. Who knows what Pete Carroll is thinking, despite me having a picture of him on my desk here. Why I still have that, I don't know. Oh, someone was saying, who gifts a frame? It was, what do you guys, White Elephant or Dirty Santa? You're familiar with those, right? Those are
never heard it called Dirty Santa.
Really? I wonder if that's a West Coast thing. Yeah, we always had Dirty Santa.
Nope.
Oh, Santa could get quite dirty, but we'll leave that at where it is. Russell Wilson, nicely 69% in the flex. Carson Wentz 10. I didn't end up with Jalen Hurts. So I do have 2% Jalen Hurts in captain. So there we go. There's the spots. But just throwing that out there since a few people do ask about that. We got about 600 people left here. Reminder, hit that like button on the way out. We do appreciate that. Subscribe. That would be even better. But for you guys, promo code BLUE, BLUE, gets you $1 off, or for $1, all access Awesemo content for a week. That goes away at midnight tonight. Just jump on in. And if you already did the Thanksgiving special, $1 for the express package, that's going to run out here shortly. It's another $1. Just grab it now and enjoy it through the weekend. There we go. I'm thinking I'm going to go not doing pizza tonight. It's actually steak salad. Kyle does not approve. Jordan does.
I'll eat the lettuce. I'll eat the greens.
All right. Well, it's not just steak. It's actually filet mignon, Costco style. To me and my wife, we get the big package at Costco and we turn that into 4 meals. So there we go. Tonight is the steak salad version. But with that, we're going to get on out of here. You can follow Awesemo at Awesemo_COM on Twitter. You can follow Kyle at Kyle Tweets here. And I, of course, am at EMac DFS. With that, gamers, good luck. One of these times I'm going to watch and I'm still going to be dancing before the screen goes off.